Hello and welcome to the Sound Up Seattle podcast, your one-stop shop for all things Seattle and Washington sports. I'm your host, Tyler Cartwright, joined as always by my co-host,
John Carey,
as he hypes himself up for this episode because it's going to be a fun one. There's not a ton going on in Seattle sports at the moment. Obviously, the Kraken are playing. There's been some Ichiro Hall of Fame news, all that good stuff, which we'll talk about over time. It's not necessarily super pressing, but for us, right now, today, we are going to do what we're going to call a heat check. We're checking out storylines in Seattle sports for the year of 2025 and how those can look. What do we think that those will be going forward? And so that's going to be a fun one for us. John, anything to say before we get started?
Yep, let's get it going.
All right, here is some Coyote Picnic. All right, John. So let's talk about what this episode is going to contain, right? What a heat check is for us in the context of this episode of Sound Up Seattle means that we are going to each talk about something that may or may not happen in Seattle sports in the year 2025 and potentially the future. And from there, we're both going to give a rating of 1 to 10, 10 being the most likely we think it'll happen, or in that case, it'll be 10 is like we are sure that it's going to happen, and a 1 being there's no chance of that happening at all. And we'll kind of go from there. So to get us started, the first thing that we want to talk about, this pod is just so excited about basketball, and this is the first thing any chance we get. We talked about the Sonics mock draft a couple weeks ago, and we want to know, I'm going to put it in this context. Do you think that there's potential for the Sonics to be announced this year, 2025, to come to the league in 2026? Give me a heat check on that, and we can talk through it.
Yeah, for me, I would say the heat check value on that is a 2. I do not think it's very likely. And yeah, I guess I want to hear your conversation for why you think it is more likely, and then I'll come in with the cold hammer blow of truth.
Yeah, so for me, I think it's more likely. I'm not saying that it's above a 5. I think it sits right around that like 3 or 4 margin. I would say 4 to be optimistic, but I think a 4 is a good call just because I think the league knows the influx of talent is so high. They just signed the new media rights deal, and they kind of are ready to have this new influx of teams just to make the league a little bit more balanced, a little bit less top heavy, that kind of thing, where teams aren't tanking as often, things of that nature. So I think the league is ready. It's more about getting things in order. And I think for that reason, it's a little bit likely, but I agree with you. It's not super likely. A 2 is pretty low. Talk about it.
Yeah, there are just a couple of factors that make that sort of timescale very unlikely. If we're talking before 2030, I feel much better. But in the short term, a lot of us were working under the assumption, particularly with previous comments made by NBA Commissioner Adam Silver, that the new media rights deal was kind of the threshold to cross before they were going to kick expansion into gear. You know, they wanted to have a clear idea of their short-term and long-term financial future with this new media rights deal. And so we've cleared that benchmark. I believe the new media rights deal was signed about 4 months ago, something like that. And we've all just been kind of waiting for the league to start talking expansion ever since that happened. Now, Adam Silver's come out and he's thrown some buckets of water on that. He's talked about the league being careful and, kind of reviewing their options going forward, that they're not in a hurry. And that's got a lot of people really down. There's even been talk about Seattle and Vegas aren't locked in. There will be other places to look at for expansion as well. And so a lot of people are kind of throwing their hands up right now, like, what the heck, where's this coming from? And while I do think it's very unlikely that the Sonics are announced, even as, a committee, looking into the Sonics as an expansion team is announced in 2025. I do think it's not that bad. It to me is classic, leverage. And the reason that they're applying some leverage right now, there are 2 main reasons. One, the Boston Celtics are up for sale. They do not want to talk expansion until that deal is done. That's for 2 reasons. One, if there are 3 teams available for purchase, that being the Celtics, Sonics, and whoever Vegas affiliate would be, each team's going to be cheaper. When there's one team on the market, there's no competition. It's not okay.
Supply versus demand.
Exactly. It's like maybe we'll take our bid over to Vegas and see what they say. It's one team. Everybody wants a sports team. Has to look at Boston. It's obviously a huge franchise, a huge legacy franchise. So one reason is they want to keep the price high, and the second reason is Boston is going to reset the market for what an NBA franchise goes for. Adam Silver's like, why would we sell two teams for $4 billion each when after the Celtics go for $6 billion, that's going to be the price for each of those new teams. So very strategic of them on multiple fronts to wait until after the Celtics are sold. And they're also waiting. They've got some lawsuit stuff going on with the new media rights deal. I'm sure they want to get that figured out. But once those two things are done, once media rights are figured out and the Celtics are sold, I do think expansion will kick into much higher gear. And I think that, it's all bluster offering to other cities. There's nobody else with a market like Seattle, or with the money that Vegas has. I think those have been the only two names thrown around for years now. So I think it's just a little gamesmanship on the NBA side. But with that being said, 2025 not looking good, which makes me sad. I was hoping it would be as soon as 2025.
Yeah, when we started the pod, I was like, okay, in a couple years, there's really, I think it was, it was pre-media rights deal, but the Celtics weren't, hadn't gone up for sale or anything like that. We started the pod 2-3 years ago at this point. We were pretty hopeful that it would be in a couple years, and, we're still going to keep doing the pod, all that stuff. Don't get us wrong, but we were hopeful that there would be some basketball to talk about and some exciting news on that front. So it's been a little slow for us here at Sound Up Seattle.
That's a good point. I forgot that was one of our founding reasons, was like, let's get in, let's hit the ground running before the Sonics are back. We're going to be retiring by the time the Sonics are back. Yeah. And it's, of course, the Celtics had to go up for sale right as all this stuff is going on. You couldn't wait 5 years, Celtics owner. But it is what it is. Stay patient. It'll happen.
Yes. So I like that. I appreciate your reasoning. And I understand, the NBA is a business. All that stuff is happening. I still like my 4.
Yeah. And so, we both kind of had the same take there for the Sonics, but going forward, we'll each present a take for these coming options. Moving on from those, not very hot takes. I guess they were hot takes because the values were pretty low. Moving on to something that might be a little more optimistic. The Seattle Mariners. We've each prepared a take. Mine is looking at the macro, and I'm here to talk about the team. The Seattle Mariners have not crossed the 90-game threshold or made the playoff since 2022. My question for you, my take is, how hot of a take is it that the Seattle Mariners will win 92 games in 2025 and will finish first in the AL West?
In terms of a heat check, I'm gonna talk myself through this. I'm gonna say my gut reaction immediately was a 7. I was like, okay, I could see the Mariners doing that. 93 wins or 92 wins isn't actually that many, and I don't think it would have even won the AL West last year. Or maybe last year was when it would have, and the Astros have been, running it with over 100 wins the few years before. So I think 92, the key there is 92 winning the AL West. Do I think the Rangers have gotten better this offseason? Yes. Do I think the Astros have gotten better this offseason? They're kind of staying the same. The loss of Kyle Tucker is interesting. They might have gone down even a little bit. Loss of Bregman as well. But the Astros are just going to be perennially at least good. Like, I think they will be, at the very minimum, vying for that second place spot in the AL West. The real question is, how high did the Rangers jump? Because the A's and Angels, didn't. We're going to be at least third. So we'll see. In terms of winning the AL West, I think it's possible. Winning it with 92 games is not as likely. And so I'm not super keen on the 92 winning the AL West, but the Mariners currently have a chance to really upgrade. There's a lot of discussion right now about Pete Alonso. And if they add him, I think we get more than 92 wins and win the AL West for sure. I think if we can piece together some other things, I think 92 wins is possible. And getting into the playoffs is plausible for sure.
Nice. Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying there, how those two factors don't necessarily meet beautifully, like 92 games likely, winning the division of 92 games not likely. The reason I came up with those two specific values is that if they hit 92 games in terms of wins, that will be their best winning season since 2003. just 2 years after their 116 win season. So it
That is
will have
pretty
been
nuts.
more than 2 decades since they won 92 games if they are managed to hit that number in 2025. And the reason I bring up first in the AL West is they have finished second in the AL West 3 out of the last 4 years, and that has turned into 1 playoff appearance. So, thanks to the top-heavy strength of the American League, it's been pretty hard to get a wild card with the second best record in the AL West. It seems like they will likely have to win it, or there's a reasonable chance that they'll have to win it if they want to make the dance. So those 2 numbers combined are what I'm aiming for there. I think I'm a little more optimistic. I think I would give it maybe like a 5 combined. That being because I do think Houston will regress. I think we saw them regress pretty heavily at the start of last year. Obviously a lot of injuries to their pitching. And then bounce back, but they've lost a couple big names. The names that they still have are getting older, and not all of them are old, but some of them are. And yeah, I'm just not seeing a ton of really young talent coming in on that team. And at some point it's gonna fall off the other side. So I could see it being this year. And then the Rangers are so weird, man. They're so hard to judge year to year. Maybe they have an awesome year and finish first, or maybe they have a very similar year to last year. So I think the division is as up for the taking as it has been for the last couple of years. And this Mariners team, I am optimistic that a couple of the trades that they've made, and particularly getting Alvarado into the clubhouse for a full season, is going to really make a big difference on the offensive side of the ball.
Oh,
so
Rosarena. I was like, Alvarado.
That's so funny. Rosarena. I was thinking it's like Jose Alvarado, right? And for some reason, the New Orleans Pelicans.
So you have the New Orleans Pelicans backup point guard.
Yeah, correct. No. Randy Arozarena. Gosh, that's just a total brain fart. But that's going to make a big difference. So I think those 2 combined, I think they can get to 92, and I'm optimistic that 92
so
can take the division.
Giving it a 5, but you said you were higher on the take than me. I said 7. So you're still leaving a little low.
I see. I thought you said 7 for the first part, and then you came down with the playoff aspect.
I'm sticking on 7.
Yeah, if 5 is flip a coin, I think that's a reasonable guess, because I still have questions about the team. They have not yet brought in that last big name that we have hoped for. And yeah, between the Rangers and the Astros, hoping for both to fall off is an ask. So I appreciate that you're at 7. I hope you're right, but I think I am at a 5.
So here's further argument for my point, and I just kind of thought of this while you were talking. The Mariners were on pace in June to win the AL West handily last year.
Yeah,
and then they just had that huge, basically month-long skid where they just couldn't get a win, basically. And that brought them down to below the Astros and 10 games back at one point from the AL West. I think they just need more consistency, and I think that they can get that. Randy's going to be here the whole season. Hopefully we'll get better signings, and, even Solano, the addition of Solano as an average guy that can get on base. It's like Victor Robles will be here for this whole season. Like, all of these things, to me, indicate that the team will be better than last year. And I think the pitching, you can't rely on it too much to be as healthy as it was last year, even with Brian Woo's late start. Like, that's still really good numbers pitching-wise and health-wise in that field. But I still think that you can rely on this pitching staff to, give you, and basically the pitching staff will give you at least 80 wins. Like, this pitching staff is assuring you 80 wins, and then the rest of it is up to Julio and the offense.
Yeah, that's well said. And you know what? You're kind of talking me back into it. I think I will come up to a 7. I'll sit right next to you.
Look at that.
One other thing that I think is worth noting, and it kind of got lost in the shuffle of just the craziness of the end of last year, but when Service got fired in the middle of the season, he was 64-64 through 128 games. Dan Wilson, kind of an up and down start for him as the Mariners manager, finished last year 21-13 in his 34 managed games. It's almost twice as good as Service did. I really think the team was looking for some new guidance, and it does seem that they've seen something under Wilson that they can reach for. So small sample size, but it was nice to see a positive change with the change of head coach. Obviously, every time you change your manager out, you hope to see improvement, and we did. So yeah, I'm liking it. I'm up to a 7.
Yeah, I think also Edgar as the hitting coach, like all of those things with Dan as the head coach, like just a really good confluence of events that led to the team hitting better, and I think more confidence from the pitching staff and everything like that, getting back to their norm. So I'm looking forward to this year, and if they can ride that wave, stick with these guys, like we saw some good progress towards the end of the season, so we'll hope that they can stick it out again.
Yeah, well, and sorry, just one last note. This is too fun of a discussion. Randy Arozarena finished last season with a 1.0 WAR. He's a better player than that. Expect some major bounce back from Randy.
Yep. All right, I've got two Mariners discussions to be had, and I'm going to give you either the option to do both, or do you want to do one?
Let's do them both.
Let's do them both? Okay. All right, heat check time for what I think a lot of Mariners fans are calling for and a lot of Mariners fans really want for this team and this franchise just because of the way that it has been run over the last decade. Likelihood that the Mariners sell, and by the Mariners I mean John Stanton and ownership, sells the team.
Yeah, that's one for me. I'm not that lucky. I'm not that lucky. I would be thrilled. How about this? I would rather wait another 3 years, whatever the date is when the Sonics will come back. I'd rather give up 3 years of Sonic basketball for new ownership of the Mariners. That's what a big deal it is to me, but I'm not that lucky.
Yeah, the Mariners as a franchise are, I think technically 15th largest market in baseball, but they're making such good profits. Like the ownership group is not going to sell. They're just going to keep. In John Stanton's words, let me quote him from an article from when the coaching change happened about Service and switching to Dan Wilson. He said, quote, "I think to me the word that we use a lot is to have a sustainable franchise over a long period of time." And so in that context, it's like they want to invest, but they want to invest the right amount to make sure that this team can be good, which is a little concerning for people that are fans of this team because what have we been sustainable about? We've made the playoffs once in the last 22 years. It's like it hasn't really made sense. But in the same vein, it does make sense that they want to keep pushing with this ownership group and ride this wave because I think, there's higher waves to reach. It's just going to be upsetting if we win and John Stanton's like the guy and we are all okay with this because it's been frustrating for the last decade.
Yeah, and it's also just timing-wise. Not only is the team in a place, I should say the league is in a place where it's not a great time to sell, where there just haven't been many recent sales.
I agree.
They're right in the middle of their media rights deal. It's just not a great time for it. But this team, too, teams that sell are typically teams that bottom out, which the Mariners are not doing, teams that are as expensive as they will ever be, where it's a profitable time to sell. That's what the Boston Celtics are doing. They're like, man, we're never going to be worth more than we are right now. Let's sell. And teams where the owner does something incredibly sketchy and gets pressured out by the league. I'm really hoping for that one. But so far, no luck.
Yeah. I think, you look at even the A's right now who are, they're moving from Oakland and everybody in Oakland is like, sell the team. And this guy, it's basically just a money grab to move. And so he's going to, the A's are going to be just as profitable, if not more profitable if they're in Vegas. And it's like, yeah, he's going to take a hit for a couple of years, but eventually this man is going to make a lot of money. It's an investment for this guy. It's not him loving the city of Oakland and the Athletics as a baseball organization. It's him wanting money. And that's what this is for a lot of these owners and general in sports, which is both frustrating as a fan, but also understandable. Like, these guys want to make money, and this is an investment for them. They're not just buying the team. Like, if I bought the Mariners, I would put all of the money that I have into them, hoping that they win one World Series and then go bankrupt. It's not the right way to do business. It's not the way to own a team. So it does make sense what they're doing. It's just frustrating as a fan base. Agreed. Loud and clear. All right. Also, people need to stop yelling, sell the team. The Mariners do not need to be sold. Like, I appreciate that that discussion can be had, but they don't need to be sold. I'm okay with John Stanton as the owner. It just means less if you do it all the time. Save it. It's happening all over baseball, and save it for when it actually matters, and then come out in force and throw rocks at his car or something. Like, you're not going to get anything done by passively chanting "sell the team" when your team's winning 90 games. Like, that's not how it works. Yeah. All right. My other one that is a better discussion is probably fun for us in the sense of if this happens, it's going to be very exciting. likelihood that a Mariners pitcher, not the best Mariners pitcher, but a Mariners pitcher wins the Cy Young Award in 2025?
So I'm in a great spot for this discussion, which is my ignorance of American League pitchers. I cannot claim to be an expert on the top names at the position across the American League. And that puts me in an amazing spot of being very confident with my yes. I think I'll go as high as 8 on this.
Wow.
And some of that is going to be unfounded thanks to my lack of information about others. But part of it, too, is just this is such a talented pitching staff. They're really coming into their own in terms of, hitting their age primes and all these things. And between them, I just feel really good. Gilbert, I feel great about. Kirby would be a little bit of a surprise, but a bounce back. And then I think Bryce Miller is maybe my favorite for this. I think Gilbert's a better pitcher, but Miller has higher upside. He was our highest WAR pitcher last year, 3.4 WAR. It was just really, really good. He's 25 years old right now. Gilbert's 27. So we've got 25, 26, and 27-year-old pitchers that are really good, hitting their stride. And it also helps my 92 win argument. That makes a lot more sense if we have the Cy Young.
Yeah, I think looking at this discussion in full, you have to think the Mariners pitchers, Bryce Miller, George Kirby, and Logan Gilbert were 3 of the top 10 pitchers in the American League last year. Just numbers-wise, they were. Luis Castillo's good, but he's definitely coming down. I think Miller's a sleeper. I also think Brian Wu could be kind of a sleeper Cy Young candidate if he goes a full season. Like, numbers-wise, he was amazing last year. He had a couple rocky starts, but like a whip under 0.9, I believe. I think whip was like 0.89 or something like that.
Yeah, 0.898.
That's crazy. That's actually insane. And so statistically, I think, whether it's Gilbert through his innings pitched, ERA, wins, all that stuff, like he could do that. Bryce Miller could go strikeouts wise. They all have such good arsenals for this, except George Kirby. I would say George Kirby is one of the guys who is less likely. He'll be, he could finish top 10 easily at any given year, but I just don't think his arsenal and the way that he pitches bodes well for winning the Cy Young. But with that being said, I'm going to put this at a 7 again. I think a 7 is a good spot for this. Gilbert or Miller could easily, be top 3 Cy Young candidates, and it really just takes, one final push towards the end of the season, good marketing, that kind of stuff to win the Cy Young. And then Brian Wu, my sleeper pick for Cy Young this year. If you're making bets out there, he's probably in the plus 3,000 range. Maybe throw a little $10 on that.
That's how you buy a house right there. You're welcome. I like the Wu pick too. I like him probably, to your point, I like him probably over Kirby. In terms of upside. Obviously Kirby plays a lot more, but I'm a little out on Kirby's ability to be the best pitcher in the American League. But yeah, man, there's a good chance. I think the thing about pitching too is it's not, of all the like major positions in professional sports, it's the least like, the best guys are the best every year and they win every year. These guys can have such incredible years and then fall back to earth in a big way. You can have guys that have 1 year that's just ungodly and the rest of their careers are pretty ho-hum. I look back at Jake Arrieta in 2015, I think it was, when he won his Cy Young. And he was a good pitcher. He was a really good pitcher that just had one unbelievable year and put it all together and was pretty easily the Cy Young choice that season. The next year, right back to Jake Arrieta, normal stuff. So, the idea of Bryce or Logan or Wu putting together one of those seasons, not far-fetched for me.
Dude, Robbie Ray, the Mariners had a Cy Young winner a year after he won the Cy Young, and then he got injured, and he, the year after he won it, he was like very average.
Yeah,
and that was probably their biggest I think that was their biggest free agent signing of all time in the Robbie Ray deal.
It's so weird to remember that he won the Cy Young the year before we got him. That's crazy.
It's wild. So the Cy Young is, Tariq Skubal won it last year, and it feels so hit or miss. Like Blake Snell has won it a couple times. If he pitches 200 innings, like his strikeouts, like he has the potential to win it anytime he's throwing 200 innings. Seattle guy, so we got to rep him a little bit, but he's in the National League. You got a lot of the good pitchers in baseball in the National League. Like the Mariners as a staff, definitely in the American League, have the best opportunity. So I like that, like those odds.
Yeah. One question for you. Of the Mariners pitchers last year, How many pitched over 200 innings?
I think just 2.
Who were those 2?
It was Gilbert and it was probably Kirby, right?
Good guess. Just 1. Gilbert at 208. Kirby was second at 191. It's a hard milestone to reach. You got to pitch a lot.
It really is. Like, I think Gilbert had the most innings in baseball last year. Just crazy, endurance by that man. Durability. Great year.
Yeah. Yep, I'm with you.
All right, that is it for the Mariners. Let's move on. What do you got? What's our next topic, John?
Okay, let's move on to our Seattle Seahawks. And I'm going to start it out again with kind of my high-level nonsense. And what I want to ask is, will the Seattle Seahawks... sorry, I got to remember how I was framing my question. Will the Seattle Seahawks win 10 or more games again next year? Now, the context for this is, obviously, they went 10-7 this year. That has been their best record since Wilson was on the team in 2020 when they went 12-4 and lost the wild card game. This is a team that, in the last 4 years, it's gone 7-10, 9-8, 9-8, 10-7. And this year, was very up and down. It's a hard year to judge off of going forward. There are obviously some things we really like in terms of growth and improvement from some of our young players. There are also things that I'm less encouraged with. So, hot take, give it a rating. The Seattle Seahawks win 10 games in 2025.
This is a 5. Right off the bat, I'm going to give you that. And the reason for that is we talked about this last week, I think, with the Ryan Grubb firing and things of that nature. With regards to this offense is probably, this last season, 2024, was the best season that this offense has had in the last, half decade. Besides that 12-4 season, I think, with Russell Wilson. And that was, purely based on the deep ball and things like that. This upcoming season, I think the offense will regress. And additionally, I think that the defense from this upcoming season, or from 2024, won't actually improve that much. Like, in terms of what we gave up defensively, there were a couple stinkers against the Bills and the Lions. It's we gave up 40 points to those teams. That makes sense. Our offense is the one thing that I think production-wise has the potential to change. I think the defense will be consistent. And so with that being said, is the offense going to get better? And I think no, or it'll stay at the very least the same. I don't think it's going to improve. And for that reason, even though I think the 49ers are going to take a step back, the Rams are going to take a step back, I just think the Seahawks are not in a position to win more than 10 games. I think 10 is their peak next year.
Sure. I appreciate that. I think I am more optimistic than you on this case. I'm giving that one an 8. I think it's quite likely. I wouldn't be shocked if it didn't, but I think it's quite likely. Couple points on that. This is a team that has the skill positions. Geno Smith is at the very least a very efficient passer. He's got a great receiving core. Defense has some stars in the secondary, which is always important, and some really talented players on the defensive line. The biggest glaring need for this team, obviously, offensive line. That is a position. It's part of what's been so frustrating, but it's really a position that you can address through the draft. Top 10 picks, they'll typically be a left guard among them, but other than that, there are a lot of talented offensive linemen that you can get in the mid-first round and certainly into the second, third, and fourth rounds. So if they prioritize it, it's not I hope we hit at quarterback. It's a situation where it's no, they'll be good. They will be good if they invest. And if they invest and if it goes well, say what you will about Grubb. I disagreed with his firing, but this offense was very spastic. And part of the reason for that is when you're not running the ball, drives are either very successful or they peter out immediately. If you're living in, there's a reason teams run the ball. Passing is obviously way more efficient in terms of big plays, but first down turns into second down, turns into 3rd and 10, and then suddenly, the pass rush is coming at you and drives stop. If they can improve the offensive line and just give this offense some consistency in terms of, you don't have to complete every pass. It's okay to miss a pass and, it's 2nd and 7 and then it's 3rd and 4 and now you have options. I could see the offense actually taking a big step forward. So that, and I think you buried the lead a little bit. The other two best teams in this division are both certainly going to regress next year. Just a lot of age on both of those rosters.
I don't know how much the Niners can regress from this last year, but I agree with you that they will not be as talent-laden as they were this last year.
Well said.
But yeah, I think the Rams are going to regress. It's really a question of, I need to look at like our schedule for next year, because do I think the league is going to be better next year than it was this year? I really don't know. In terms of the talent influx, the Giants, if they end up picking Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward or whatever it is, whoever picks these top quarterbacks, it's not like there's a Jaden Daniels in this year's draft where it's like this team is going to immediately get better because there's a player that they're adding to their roster. And in that case, I think another year of Geno just like getting older is just going to make it that much harder for this team to be better than 10 wins. There's a world where 10 wins the NFC West next year. Like that's very much a possibility. And so it's just, to me, I need to see the schedule. I need to see what else is going on right now. I just don't have that faith in the Seahawks yet.
Yep, that's totally fair. I totally get it. The last thing I'm going to say, to your point, their expected win-loss statistically was only 8.7 and 8.3, so they outperformed their expected value, but their defense was 11th in the NFL in terms of points per game. Their offense was 18th out of 32 teams. There's more talent on this offense than 18th in the league, so I could see their defense, to your point, staying about the same, staying 11th, and their offense jumping up to 9th. And then suddenly I do think that's a 10 or 11 win team.
Yeah, that's fair. The key right there is you said 10 or 11 wins. You have to be more than 10 based on your question.
No, 10 or more. 10 or more.
Oh, 10 or more? Jesus Christ. Now I got to reevaluate. Let me give it a 6. I'll give it a 6.
Okay, creeping up.
All right. Talking about our skill players and that kind of thing, I've got a question about the Seahawks for me. How likely is it in 2025 that the Seahawks trade a keystone skill receiver or skill player? So that could be a wide receiver, that could be a running back, could be a quarterback if you want to refer to that in that way. Walk me through your thought process about this question, and then give me your answer.
Yeah, I would say the answer to this is a 3. I would be pretty surprised. I don't think there's no reason to trade Geno. His contract is too good, and unless he has a really down year, if he's having a horrible year, nobody's going to want to trade for him. And if he's having a good year, I guess you could trade him just for the assets, but I don't see them doing bad enough to move on. It's kind of a paradox. Like if Geno plays well, the Hawks will be doing okay. And if they're doing okay, they're not going to trade him. And if they're doing bad, it's because he sucks, and then nobody will necessarily want him. I think their receivers are kind of untouchable in terms of Smith-Jigba and Metcalf. The reason I'm giving it a 3 not a 1 is looking at the running back position. I think we saw last year Zach Charbonnet not consistently step up in a big way, but in spots was excellent. Really, really good. And I also think we saw Kenneth Walker just really struggle to stay on the field. And when he was on the field, he wasn't nearly as productive as he's been in the past. If Walker comes out to a hot start, I would not be shocked to see the team move on from him and try to get some value back by getting a team to bite on an older running back who has struggled with injuries.
Yeah, I think the key for me here is, they're not going to trade JSN. I think it's very, very unlikely that they trade DK. Geno, it depends on what we see from him, this offseason, maybe the contract talks. I don't think that the team really wants to have those. I think they want to be done with Geno after the season. But if he decides, hey, I'm not going to play this year if you guys don't pay me or give me an extension, pulls a little NBA player on us, then there's some discussion to be had about that. But in general, I think that this question really is about the running backs and about, do the Seahawks move on from Charbonnet? Do they move on from, Charbonnet is the guy who's peaked already, and they could move on from him in the offseason in a way that, they sell him to a team and say, hey, this guy, Kenneth Walker's been taking all his touches, but this guy could be an RB1 if you play him right. Or do you look at Kenneth Walker and you say, hey, this guy, during the season, if he starts off strong, he has a good 3-4 games, then like you said, the Seahawks could trade him and get some value out of a guy who has had a lot of injuries. His legs seem to be wearing down. I think those are both not likely, but there's definitely a chance that those happen. And for that reason, I would give it a 4, just a little bit higher than you. But I think I think you did kind of bear the lead in terms of like, yeah, these running backs are tradable as assets. It's like they didn't do well this last year, or they were able to kind of instill what they wanted to this last year in terms of the running backs, but I think they could move on from them and be totally fine. Sign a running back in the offseason and be totally okay.
Yeah, and Kenneth Walker, he's coming into his fourth year, but he's not. I said he's old. He's 24, which is middle-aged for a running back. It is not young, which you might think, but middle-aged. He is coming off, a down year, but in his career, he broke 1,000 yards in 2022 and almost did last year. So, sorry, not last year, 2024, almost in 2023. So he's a talented guy. He's the one that I would keep my eye on, just because. Also, looking at how McDonald might want to run offense, I'm not absolutely certain that Kenneth Walker is the type of running back he wants back there. And there is value there. I think if you're talking about trading a skill position guy like this, you have to pair the value at the position and a team's desire to move away from it. So Kenneth Walker is the only guy I see that potential with.
He does worry me that he could turn into like a Josh Jacobs or Saquon type, where it's like he's just away from the Seahawks. We traded him, and now he's great. Granted, those were free agency signings, but in the same way, it's like those guys excelled on their new teams this last season, and I think that could happen for K9 if things he gets behind a good offensive line, things like that. So we will definitely see. But I like where we're at, kind of just below 50% chance.
100%. Okay, well, that's the Hawks. Let's do the last pro team before moving on to college. Let's talk about the Seattle Kraken.
Yes.
Gosh, do we have to? Do we have to talk about the Seattle Kraken? I guess we can. I've got kind of a downer one, but I also just think it is interesting. Kraken obviously have regressed each of the last 2 years since their excellent 2022-2023 season. How hot of a take is it to say that the Seattle Kraken will finish 8 out of 8 in the Pacific Division in 2025? For some context, they finished last in 2021, finished fourth in that excellent year where they made it to the second round of the NHL playoffs, and then fifth in 2024 or 2023 and sixth this current year. So the question is, does this team continue to regress? For that reason, I'm going to give it a 7. I think there's a good chance this team continues to go the wrong way.
Yeah, I think the direction of this team is really up in the air. I don't think the front office, I don't think management really knows what they want to do in terms of how they want to construct this team. And I honestly, I think I could give this a 9. Like I am up there with like, this has real potential to happen. If we're talking about next year, right? So just for clarification, currently in this season, they're 6th. Are you talking about this season they will finish 8th, or next season they will finish 8th?
It's always hard with the seasons where you overlap in the year. But so yes. No, the 2025-2026 season.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a 9. Like I really, the Beniers signing was kind of their big thing this offseason. And I don't think there's anything pointing in the right direction for a team that, if you look at it as from an expansion standpoint, it's like they picked up a bunch of guys, and those guys have been with the team for a few years, and it's like they're getting older. It's not getting any better player-wise. Like they were kind of at least at their peak, or if not, should have gotten to their peak last year. It's like the team was built for that little sequence and getting to the playoffs in 2022, and since then it's just been downhill. So I think they're going to need to take a real hard look in the mirror and say, okay, do we reset? Do we try and sign a bunch of guys? Whatever it is, but I think they're going to be kind of lost this offseason. I haven't seen any direction from them, and for that reason, I'm going to give it a 9.
Yeah, I think maybe the biggest aspect of that is, expansion drafts are always hard. We talked about this with the Sonics, but you just end up with a lot of mid talent. You're very deep in mid talent, but you're missing the top end stuff. And given that opportunity in 2021 to take the number 1 overall pick and getting Matty Beniers, Beniers is a talented guy, still young. He has not been what they expected him to be.
No.
This team has been pretty cohesive since their start. It's been basically 4 seasons of the same guys. Beniers is 9th in total points on this team, which is pretty shocking. It's not what we would expect from a guy with his capital. And hopefully he'll still grow into it, but that hasn't looked great, and they're not going to get more top-end talent until they bottom out. So maybe long-term it's for the best that they find themselves in 8th place in the Pacific next year.
Yeah. I guess my question for the Kraken was, do they make the playoffs this year? There's still technically a chance. They're still in 6th, and we can dive into this. But yeah, let me just start it off with that. Do they make the playoffs in the 2024-2025 season?
Oh, giving it to me.
Yep.
No. And I'm going to keep my answer here short. Obviously, what are they this year? 21 wins, 24 losses, 3 overtime losses. So 21 and 27 in American terms. Record aside, their simple rating system, it just accounts for goal differential and strength of schedule. They're minus 0.27, meaning they are 0.27 points below average. And their strength of schedule is below 0 as well. So their simple rating system is judging them poorly in the games they've played, and they have not even played very competitive teams. So, I do not feel very optimistic. I think if anything, their record will diminish. I think ratings wise, they're probably more like a 7th place team than a 6th place team. So, I do not anticipate a playoff run.
Yeah, recently, over the last little stretch, they've actually done decently well, but I don't think it's sustainable. I think we've talked about it all season where this team has just been very mediocre. I don't think I don't think there's a chance that they make that jump up to the 4 spot. There's a higher chance that they'd go down to the 8 than it is that. So
agreed.
For that reason, I don't think it's likely. I'm going to give it a 1, just because I think it's the most unlikely scenario that we've seen today.
Yeah, I forgot to rate it. I would give it a 1. Yeah, if we could give it a 0, I would think about it.
All right, let's move on. A little college basketball talk. Let's do a little college basketball because we know John loves his Zags. And so I've got one that could get a little spicy here in this podcast. John, give me your heat check. Do the Zags miss the playoffs? Miss March Madness altogether this season in 2025?
Yeah.
They just lost to Oregon State, brother. They just lost to Oregon State.
Well, that wasn't even the bad one. They lost to Santa Clara right after that, which was a way worse loss.
That one.
Yeah, that was a tough one.
Jesus.
I am going to give it a 2. It wouldn't completely shock me, but there are a couple factors in their favor. One, they're by no means out of contention to just win the conference regular season, thanks to the relative weakness of the WCC. Obviously, a lot more mid teams than there have been in the past, but St. Mary's is not the program it normally is. San Francisco is not having the year they were last year. Wazoo and Oregon State are both quality programs, but they're both going to lose. They're both going to drop some of these games. If anything, some of the Zags losses are just showing how talented the WCC has gotten, which is good. But it also means a couple losses haven't scared me away. And if they fail to win the regular season title, which they have done previously, they'll win the tournament. They run the WCC tournament. They have not lost a tournament in many years. And since I was there, I should say. So I would give it a 2.
Yeah, I think looking at the WCC as a whole right now, you see it and you're like, none of these teams seem great. And I think that's the problem with the WCC is like the last couple of years, it's been Gonzaga running the show. They lose maybe one game to St. Mary's and then win the tournament. And then St. Mary's, their only losses to Gonzaga. It's like those are the teams. San Francisco is kind of frisky over the last couple seasons, but in general, the WCC was so top heavy that those Gonzaga and St. Mary's were basically assured their spots. With the rate that college basketball is going, there's just more parity in general. So maybe that's still an option. And looking at the stats, I think you could make an argument that the Zags maybe still deserve to get in. Rank wise, they're probably in the 30s right now, but the Zags, I think with the WCC, it's whoever wins the tournament. And so with that context right now, I don't think any more teams from the WCC will make it just because of the strength of the Big Ten, the SEC, the ACC, the Big 12, like all of these other conferences are going to have even more entrants than usual. I think the WCC gets one team this year. And if the Zags don't win, I really think they won't make the tournament. And for that reason, I'm just a little scared. I'm not going to give it more than a 5, but I think I'll hover around a 4 again.
Yeah, I think you're forgetting how many teams are make the tournament. 64 teams make it to March Madness. The WCC will get at least 2. I could see the WCC getting 4. I could definitely see the WCC getting 4. Remember, the Pac-12 is gone. That obviously
the Pac-12 being gone.
It's spread around, but that doesn't mean every other team is going to get an additional 4 bids now. If anything, it helps the WCC's number of bids, the fact that one of the Power 5 is now technically gone. And a lot of the new Pac-12 are currently sitting in the WCC. So there's no doubt in my mind that the WCC will get 2 bids. I could see up to 4. So that helps the Zags case.
Yeah, it's fair. You have to think about the total number of conferences that get auto bids to the tournament. I think that's somewhere in the 16 to 20 margin. I don't remember exactly where it is.
It might be as high as 30. It's pretty crazy how many conferences there are for college basketball.
Yeah. And I think, the WCC could stack up in kind of that. I'm trying to think of where the conference lines up, and I picture what team is Wichita, or what conference is Wichita State in? Because that's what I think of right now.
Oh, they're one of the minor ones. They might be in the MAC.
Is it like the MAC or something?
Yeah, it sounds... We both guessed that one, so we'll call that one right. Sorry, Wichita.
But that's kind of where I see them stacking up. So we'll see. To me, I think it could be 1, but it could also be 4. I think the potential is there, but I'm also a little worried that the WCC in general is considered worse as a whole because of the level of play. Gonzaga lost all of its ranked games basically so far. It's the committee, whoever is voting on who gets in, is
they didn't lose. They spanked Baylor and Indiana, who were both ranked. But the point is well taken. It's been a tough stretch for the Zags. The WCC will get 2. I'll give you good odds if you want to place a bet on 2 teams.
At the end of the day, I'm making this argument as the devil's advocate of trying to get you to cave and get a little upset about this.
But honestly, and the truth is that any of the last 5 or 6 years, the answer would have been a 1, and I can't give it a 1. I have to give it I think I said a 2, maybe I'll even give it a 3, because they lost to Santa Clara this year at home, so anything could happen.
You heard it here first, guys. John Kerry does not believe in the Gonzaga Bulldogs.
You hater. Okay, I'm going to turn it around on you here with kind of an interesting take, and that take is this 2024-2025 Gonzaga Bulldogs team the best Zags team in the last 3 years? Now, let me classify that a little bit. In 2020, I should say, in the years that started 2020 and 2021, those were the national title season and the regional semi-season with Chet and Jalen, respectively. Those were teams that were the preseason number 1 ranked team in the country and the final AP poll number 1 team in the country. Those were very, very dominant teams. And there's no doubt that this program's fallen off since we've lost that top tier NBA talent that was coming in from Minnesota. Thanks, Minnesota. But in the last 3 years, now this team is already tied for losses with the 2023 team, and they're only 2 behind 2024. So they do not have a lot of wiggle room before they lose the loss battle. But there are a couple statistics in their favor. Their strength of schedule, 6.6, falls right in the middle between those 2 seasons. And their simple rating system has been excellent, obviously, playing in the WCC each of the last 3 years, but it's significantly higher this year. Their simple rating system puts them at 22.35. The previous years were 18 and 19, respectively. It's a lot better. That rating is more on par with the teams that were making it to, regional finals year after year. This year has been incredibly frustrating, but as we all know, just a ton of meat has been left on the bone. What are the chances? How hot of a take is it that this team is actually better than either of the last 2 teams?
I think talent-wise, I don't think there's a question that this team is better than the last 2 teams. The question to me lies in, is this team a better team? And I think you look at last year and the different style where it was Anton Watson as kind of your pseudo stretch forward, not really a stretch forward, but he stretched the floor, giving EK more space, but he was also a defensive anchor, and you had just a different build and things like that. I think you have to say, and for this heat check, I will say that this team, in terms of their greatness of Gonzaga Bulldogs teams over the last few years, I will give that I'll give it a 6, I guess. Like, I just don't think, I think there's a chance that this team ends up being the best and can turn it on, but I just haven't seen anything yet. Like I said, talent-wise, there's just so much meat on the bone that they've left, as you said. And then, you've got Ajayi, who hasn't really done anything yet, substantial at least. And I've just been waiting for him to pop off. I've been waiting, Caleb Battle's been super good, but it's like the fit of Battle and EK and Nemhard, like all of that just hasn't really gelled together. Ben Gregg needs to hit his threes, which he's kind of started doing recently, but it's like they're still losing games right now. So all that being said, I see potential in this team, but I'm not sold that it will be, the best one as of right. Like, in terms of how are you defining best, I guess, is another question. Like, are you going to say that the team that makes it the furthest in the tournament was the best team? Like, how are you going to define that?
Yeah, not tournament. I guess I am truly asking subjectively, like, take this team and have it play the previous year's teams like 100 times in a simulation, who comes out on top. But the point is well received. That was my salesmanship approach. And I think you picked the correct holes in that. I do think talent-wise it is, but to your point, there seem to be a lot of fit issues that they have not worked out. It would be great if they did, but they have not. This is a program that has made 9 straight Sweet 16s at this point. 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 straight Sweet 16s, which I think is an all-time college basketball record. I think this, honestly, and I'm sad to say it, I think this team is the team that breaks that stretch. I do think they make the tournament, but I do not think they win 2 games in the tournament to reach the Sweet 16. So that was my salesmanship approach, but I'm with you. A lot of talent, but just a real failure to come together.
Yeah, and there's a chance still. There's a world where the team comes together and Ben Gregg and Ajayi just start nailing threes at a 45% clip for the rest of the season, and it's like, sure, this is what this team could be. But here's a question for you, based on this discussion. Do you think the problem lies in Nemhard and Ike? Like, do you think they slow the game down too much?
No, I think Nemhard is trying to do all the right things, but I think he's a real black hole, and I think it's really caused our offense to stagnate. When he's on the court, especially with EK, there's just way too much two-man game stuff going on, and it doesn't give anybody else a chance to get into the flow of the offense. I think it's a real problem. Defensively, I can't even really tell you what it is, because they have some really good defensive pieces, but maybe Mark Few just needs to stop running zone. We got destroyed defensively. Our zone got just shot out of the gym against Santa Clara. We lost that game because Santa Clara, I think, broke like a WCC record for threes in a game against us. The zone's not really working. So, a couple issues, but Nemhard and Ike are contributors. I don't think it's their fault. I think it's the way the offense is designed. That's
fair. Oh, hate to have that discussion about your boys before we almost end the pod. We got one more thing to talk about, so bring it up.
Yeah. No, that was good. It was deserved. I'm not sure if we talked about the Santa Clara loss. It was bad. It was bad if you watched it. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about before we call it, we'll kind of end the way we finished with just kind of a one take, little more meandering, and that is the Big Ten. Since the Big Ten Pac-12 merger, it was kind of understood from the get-go that it was done for football reasons and that the rest of the programs would suffer to a certain degree. Basketball, if any other program, was the second best to benefit in terms of, money and status and all these things. So those are the two we're going to look at between Big Ten football and Big Ten basketball, without even considering volleyball and tennis and cross country and track and field, all these programs that are certainly miserable and hate traveling to Rutgers for a meet. Just looking at football and basketball, do you believe that any of the 4 Big Ten transfers, those being USC, UCLA, UW, and Oregon, already regret the decision to move to the Big Ten? Or how hot of a take is it to say at least one does?
So the first thing that I want to say is that it wasn't even done for football. It was done for money in general. So I'm just going to point that one out right away. It was all money for whatever schools went over there. Whether that be football or all the money's in football, all the rights deal is through football
money. Yeah.
But it's like the money was the real factor. It wasn't like the Pac-12 was like, oh, we need to play better competition. It's like, no, they really did it so that they can make more money.
Okay. They had 2 Pac-12 teams win 2 of the major conferences this year, just to note.
Yeah. The Pac-12 would have been fine, just competition-wise, everything like that. Like they would have been so okay. But back to your question of does anybody regret this? And I think of the teams that moved, right, USC, UCLA, Washington, and Oregon is the most happy. Obviously, they won, made their strength of schedule so much, especially in the football world, made them number one. They beat Ohio State in the middle of the season. Yeah, they lost to them, but like at the end of the day, they ended up where they wanted to besides the national championship. Like they were the top-ranked team in all of college football and just got blown out by a team that had a little chip on its shoulder. Oregon is happy. They're number 12 in the nation right now. UW just lost to them by 11 points in basketball, so that was great. USC, I think, doesn't really care as much about where their football team is at. I think basketball-wise, they've taken a step forward in terms of representation. UW is really kind of the odd man out in the sense of like UW as a school, as a university, is much more highly regarded in the other things that it does. And, after the national championship run last year, it was like, okay, maybe we could take a step forward with football. But then the Kalen DeBoer thing happened and the move, and it's like, okay, this UW football team had to rebuild. Okay, Mike Hopkins is fired. We got to hire Danny Sprinkle. It's like all of these new things are happening along with the transition. And so for that reason, UW is probably regretting it, but not because of the level of play, more because of the circumstances surrounding it. I think if they were in the Pac-12, the football team might have gone 7-5, 8-4, and we would have been a lot more happy with this rebuilding season. But because it felt like we got absolutely beat up in the run and just like things like that, the basketball team is really struggling to get going. They're 1-7, I think, right now in the Big Ten. It's like they're not happy, but the point of this is to grow your school. And so for that reason, like the school can't be upset. Money-wise, they're doing exactly what was needed to be done. Like this was bound to happen to one of the teams. I didn't necessarily expect it to be UW, but the fact that it is UW, I think they're regretting it the most. And I think with that being the case, how much are they regretting it? I would say they are at a 6.
That's interesting. Well, I appreciate that. I think the number is bigger, and I don't think it just applies to UW. I would say it's a 9 that somebody is seriously regretting it. And I think all 3 teams not called Oregon are probably feeling some pretty significant regret. Oregon, hats off to you. Absolutely. Winning Big Ten football, insane. And then to be, a ranked basketball team that's currently, what are they, 2-4, they're 6th in the Big Ten in terms of conference standings. That's just fine. Just fine by them. It's gravy. So Oregon is certainly happy. But here's the thing. This is making life just a lot harder on these programs. In terms of football, Oregon was first. Then it's 8 former Big Ten teams before you get a former Pac-12 team at 4-5 USC. Nobody except Oregon from the Pac finished conference play with a positive record. So these teams have just fallen directly into the bottom feeders of Big Ten football. Now, Washington, honestly, of any of those teams, you feel like best about them having a chance to rise out of the muck because obviously this was a down year for the program and we've seen them have some really excellent years. If I was USC or UCLA, welcome home, dude. Like this is where you're going to be every year. They finished 4-5 in the Big Ten. Congratulations. Pat on the back. It can only get worse for them in terms of football. So I think that is disappointing. I do not think they were expecting to be worse than Minnesota and Rutgers and Iowa and Illinois, and they are. I think basketball is what really takes the cake. The fact that UW is last is really tough. The fact that UCLA at 9th is the second best former Pac-12 team, and that they're 4-4 in conference. USC is 3-4 in conference in basketball. Washington's 1-7 and last in the division. But Yeah, UCLA and USC. Basketball is more the side of the ball where their bread is buttered. I guess that's probably not true for USC. USC football's been pretty good. But UCLA to be 4-4 in conference play in the Big Ten. I know Danny Sprinkle has just been going nuts. I'm sorry, not Danny Sprinkle. Mick Cronin, the UCLA head coach, has been going nuts about the travel and how completely brutal it is on their teams. That, other teams have to come out to Oregon, once during the season, and then that's it for craziness. And that, Oregon, UCLA, and that UCLA has to, go to New York twice, and then, the Midwest 20 times, and that their travel is just insane. To your point, it was all about money. Nobody was going to care about the logistical stuff, but I think we're starting to see the logistical stuff really rear its head. Don't be surprised if that hurts some of these programs. If you're choosing between UCLA and Wisconsin, and you're being realistic about things, how much do you really want to be on, a 6-hour flight every other day during the season? It just sounds brutal. So I really do. Oregon, hats off to you. They're feeling right as rain. I think the other 3 teams should all be feeling mixed levels of regret about this decision.
I agree with you. I think the main thing that I think about with that is like UCLA was bound to be bad at football. Like in the Pac-12, they were going to be bad. But Correct. Really, when you talk about it logistically, I think that's where the issue arises. And so that's like, when you look at it at the situation in its entirety, you say, okay, yeah, the university itself is happy that the level of competition has been upped and the games are more watchable and they're just getting more publicity. But you're right in the sense of like the talent that they're going to be getting is going to drop off because players won't want to come to these programs and have to travel, 6 hours to get across the country to New York from LA every third weekend. It's like, that is a real problem. And I think that's why I don't think it's hitting yet. Like, that's why I gave it a 6, is that it's going to hit in the next year or two, where it's like these teams will not be able to recruit nearly as much. Like Oregon will always be okay. Their brand recruits so well. But I do think, like UW is going to struggle, even though, recruiting in football, the transfer portal is so nice. It's like, it's still going to be that much harder to get a player to want to travel that much, that frequently across the country. Same with basketball. USC as a program has like been pretty good over the last stretch. They're not great, but they've been decent. UCLA has really fallen off after the like Lonzo Ball era, and they've basically been bottom feeders, I think, for the last half decade.
They've found themselves ranked, but they certainly haven't climbed above like 11 or 12.
Yeah, they haven't been great in any way.
Yeah.
So I think in terms of where they're at in the Big Ten, I don't think anybody was shocked. Like any of those programs were shocked to be where they were. I think the real regret is going to come in the next couple of years.
Yeah, and that's a very fair point. But if they're looking ahead, I think some are feeling nervous. I think a lot of it goes back to, travel aside, Oregon's not only feeling good, they should be feeling great, because not only are they already, all the NIL money, all the brand stuff, but now they can say, hey, we are like, say Ohio State's the best in the Big Ten, fine. Then we're second best, like we are Big Ten royalty year one. And that helps recruit. It helps to play with the big boys and play at an elite level. So like I said, Oregon should be very, very happy. But this was worst case scenario for UW in terms of, this is what we were worried about. It's why we didn't want this to happen when it did, as their program was changing in so many ways after DeBoer left and they lost all those players, is like, it hurts you immediately of like, people have short memories. I'm not sure how many people are going to remember Michael Penix throwing touchdowns to Roma Dunze. I think a lot of people are going to look at last year and be like, am I sure I want to go to the, 12th team in the Big Ten instead of the second best program in the Pac-12? It can be a compounding issue. There's a reason a lot of these bottom feeders stay bottom feeders. It's hard to recruit when people see you losing all the time. And as a UW football fan, we better really hope they bounce back in a big way next year, because you string together 3 or 4 years of losing records in the Big Ten, it's only going to really start to spiral in terms of consistent play. We were really hoping they would do similar to what Oregon did and come in and establish themselves as one of the big boys in the Big Ten right away. That did not happen, and it has me majorly concerned. Yeah,
I think the move just made UW feel very, very much like a middling team. And there's a world where UW just kind of turns into Minnesota and is just like, okay, we're just never going to be great at football.
Sure.
Which would suck. That would be so awful to make that move and that to happen.
Especially considering basketball is an even worse disaster.
Yeah. It's like Minnesota's actually been decent at basketball.
Yeah.
UW has had so much trouble.
Yeah,
so we will see. But, well, God, I was talking to my boss today, and he was like, we can get some Big Ten discussion in at lunchtime. And I was like, I don't really want to talk Big Ten right now.
Pass.
So that's kind of the vibe of UW right now. It's been a struggle. So in terms of regret scale, I think I'm sticking with my 6 only because it hasn't hit yet, but I think it's going to hit very, very soon.
Yeah, and maybe we need to wait for the novelty of these big old checks to rub off, because you're right.
Yep.
A lot of people are probably looking at the bank accounts and being like, this is great. I don't care where we finished, but we'll see. Yeah. We'll see what that turns into.
Even the football players are like, man, I'm getting paid millions of dollars to play football. It doesn't matter how far I have to travel.
Yeah, but they can get paid that same money at Minnesota.
I know. Oh, all right. Anything else to say? I think that was it. We made the one-off podcast an hour long, so we're professionals at this.
God, we're good. I can feel myself getting tired right around the hour mark too. I know my body knows. I'm a well-tuned machine. No, that's all I have.
All right. Well. Sweet. Well, for John Carey, I'm Tyler Cartwright. This has been the Sound Up Seattle podcast. If you enjoyed this episode of Sound Up Seattle, please feel free to give us a follow on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find Sound Up Seattle on YouTube at Sound Up Seattle. We usually post, shorter segments of that or of the clips of, specific things that we talk about. But this one is just all one thing. So I hope you enjoyed. Those of you on YouTube, like, subscribe, do all that good stuff. TikTok got undeleted, so you can find Sound Up Seattle on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter, all at Sound Up Seattle, all lowercase, all one word. You can find me, Tyler, at TyCart50, everywhere is important. Also, email us your questions, comments, or concerns at soundupseattle@gmail.com. And one more thing before we get to John. Comment down below if you have any other takes for us to discuss. We would love to hear about them. We would love to talk about those in like a mailbag episode one of these days. So that would be very fun.
How hard take generation is? Come on, help us out.
And then John, what are you up to?
Gosh, nothing, man. I'm in between video games. I have nothing to play. I'm devastated. I spend my time reading, going on walks, spending time with loved ones. It's awful. So I'm gonna fix it as soon as I can.
All right. I guess with all that being said, I'm gonna just say let's recruit the Sonics. I'm ready for a Sonics recruit.
Go Sonics. I'm in the same way. It's like the Zags don't deserve it. Go Zags. Go Sonics.